With Miami back below 500, it's clear that there's something wrong with the team. But is there a trade that could fix things? Maybe for Julius Randle or Jay Crowder? Is it a change to the starting lineup? Perhaps one with Tyler Herro? Or as many fans have suggested, is there a point where the front office says enough is enough and it's time to blow things up? We wrap up the week by answering 5 burning questions on today's Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on all things Miami Heat. However you might be tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or wherever you find your podcast, thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. It's BetOnline, where the game starts. We're opening up the mailbag today to take your questions. You can send those questions in for future mailbags to lockedonheat@gmail.com or on Twitter or Instagram. We'll start with the latest trade rumors involving Julius Randle and Jay Crowder. So here's the first one. Jay Crowder posted a cryptic Instagram story of a clock on Wednesday. Later that night, Yahoo's Jake Fisher reported that the Suns got close to completing a 3-team trade that involved Crowder. Unfortunately, there are no details about what that trade might be, what it looked like, who it would have involved. But the Heat are a known suitor interested in Crowder. Do you think, David, that Miami could be one of these teams involved?
Well, there was a later report, and I'm not sure how credible it is or not, by a Zona Hoops, which is, I guess, a Phoenix-based site that covers some of the local sports teams, including the Suns there. And according to a source, there was a rumored deal involving the Houston Rockets and the Milwaukee Bucks. So Miami out of it, at least for some time now. But the trade fell apart. So I think Miami's chances are as good as any. But as we've answered and discussed recently, I just don't know that Jay Crowder is a realistic trade option for Miami. As bad as Miami's issues have been this season, and there are plenty of them that we'll discuss throughout the episode, I just don't know that Jay Crowder is going to necessarily sign him. Looking at just yesterday's loss to the Raptors, is Crowder that good a rebounder that he's going to make up for that incredible disparity between the two teams? No, the answer is no. Is he going to be shooting lights out in order to salvage Miami's three-point shooting percentages? No, he's not going to do that either. So he provides some stout defense. And again, he's a little bit older, so he's not quite the player he was. He's going to hit the occasional three-point shot. He might go 1 of 6, or he might go 4 of 7 if he's having a really, really good day. And you just kind of have to live with that. You've already got shooters on the roster that can do that, either Gabe Vincent, Max Strus, or Duncan Robinson. So I don't know that adding Jay Crowder is necessarily going to solve anything. Miami, if they're interested in bringing in Crowder, and they can do so cheaply by either expecting a buyout from the Phoenix Suns or whatever team acquires them, then maybe they'll look to add him. But otherwise, I just don't see that. If you're going to look to add any player on this roster, given the fact that Omer Yurtseven is going to be in the men for the next couple of months, it's probably going to be a center, somebody over 6'7". And I don't think Crowder does that. Absolutely not fit the bill.
Whether or not Jay Crowder helps this team or not, and you and I agree on this, by the way, I don't think that he does enough that you would be willing to give up an asset. And by the way, I think the Miami Heat agree with that as well. That's why if they wanted Jay Crowder, they would have included a pick or something like that. But this is a team that already is limited in what it is that they can trade. They have a limited amount of draft picks. Everybody wants to say that they have 3 first-round picks that they can trade. That's not even true. They only have 2. In order to get to 3, they'd have to unlock protections on that OKC pick that they owe them, that's top 14 protected. And by the way, you don't just unlock protections. That's going to cost Miami something in order to do that. And so they have a limited amount of draft capital. The players that they can trade are not that valuable. Tyler Herro, poison pill contract, he's not really on the table right now. Nobody's banging on the door, calling Pat Riley, asking for, hey, we really want Victor Oladipo. What it'll take to get Gabe Vincent off your hands? There's not a whole lot on the Heat's roster that other teams are antsy to acquire, and so I don't know what Phoenix would want from Miami. I don't think Miami would be willing to trade with part with a draft pick. By the way, the Suns don't even like draft picks. They don't value them in any meaningful way, so I don't even know if they were to put a first-round pick on the table, that would even get it done for Jay Crowder at this point. I don't know. It sounds like they want a player who can help them right now. Who's the player on the Heat's roster that can help Phoenix, a team with championship aspirations, right now? I don't know what the answer to that is. It's not Duncan Robinson. The contracts don't match up anyway. They want Max Strus, according to some other reports. Okay, well, what else? Because those contracts don't add up. And if I'm Miami, I'm not trading Max Strus or Jay Crowder. I'm not doing that.
Right.
So unless Phoenix is really interested in Victor Oladipo and saying, you know what, Crowder's not playing for us anyway. We know that Oladipo's got injury concerns, but at least he could be available later where Crowder's just holding himself out from us. Maybe that's the only route that I could see Miami landing Crowder in, because according to this stuff, if there is a trade going down, it doesn't sound like Jay Crowder's getting bought out. That does not sound like it's going to be an option right now. It sounds like a team like Milwaukee is really in on Jay Crowder. And by the way, that's been rumored about, right? Like that's a name that comes up in league circles as Milwaukee as sort of a dark horse, and even Atlanta, by the way. And these are both teams that are ahead of Miami in the standings. So if one of them lands Jay Crowder, that's going to be a bitter pill to swallow for Heat fans, I think.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Look, Bobby Portis starting off the year struggling. I'm not sure what his long-term prognosis would be with that team. So there's that area of concern. Grayson Allen, clearly somebody the Bucks look like they're willing to move on from, and he plays a different position anyway. But just another backup veteran who can shore up that front court there. Obviously, they're getting some really incredible performances out of Giannis Antetokounmpo. Brook Lopez has been sensational to start the season, but why not get a quality backup that's familiar with the team? Obviously, Jay played against him when he was a member of the Miami Heat. He's familiar with what they do. He's also attended Marquette University, which is nearby there. Yeah. So I think obviously there is a local connection there.
Daniel writes in, hey guys, there's been rumblings of a Julius Randle trade to the Heat, which I'm all for. Since the Heat are in need of some size at that position, what do you guys think of Randle fitting with this roster? And could this move help the Heat contend for a championship? David, what do you think?
Wes, you should answer this first, because if I recall correctly,
I do. I love
you
Julius
were
Randle.
one of the last holdouts
right.
on Julius Randle Island. I think you eventually jumped ship, and then he wound up having a sensational all-star year, which coincidentally coincided with his contract year, where he shot 41% from three-point range and a career-high number of attempts. Since then, he hasn't come close to 30. It's just a fantastic turnaround for him, unfortunately, for Randle and for the Heat. He is not the solution. He's not going to help Miami's chances as a title contender. He's a do-it-all forward who can. The size is absolutely there. He can rebound when he's engaged. Getting him there is a difficult solution, though. He can handle the ball somewhat. He has low post moves. As I mentioned before, there is the shooting, but you just never see them all tied together at the same time. And so there's questions about what Julius is like between the ears, and you never want to criticize a player or anything like that. But I just don't know that he's going to buy into the Heat system 100%, which is how Miami likes players. They like players that are engaged, that want to compete, that want to win at all costs. That's been their team motto, their ethos since Pat Riley joined in 1995. It will continue to be so even after Pat Riley steps down. I don't know that Randle is the player that embodies that kind of win it all spirit.
I do think that sometimes the Heat have to get over the, hey, is he a Heat culture guy? Does he embody that spirit and all that kind of stuff? And just maybe go out and just get the talented player. And I'm not saying that they haven't done that before, right? Like they thought Dion Waiters was talented and they went and got him. I understand how that worked out. It's sort of a counterintuitive argument to my own argument. But they did it to a certain degree with Jimmy Butler, too, who had his own kind of concerns. Turns out he was a perfect fit. But people, if you act like Jimmy Butler, if you knew that Jimmy Butler was a perfect fit in Miami before that, I think you're 80% full of it. In terms of Julius Randle,
I was 100% convinced. I'm not full of it at all.
In terms of Julius Randle, you mentioned the 41% three-point shooting season. That is an anomaly. That's the exception, not the rule with him. That was a fluky year from three-point range for him. He has been a bad three-point shooter for the entirety of his career outside of that one season. You're right. I have since sold my property on Randle Island, and I definitely took a loss on it. But he doesn't
Tumbleweeds,
fit. I don't care about I don't care about spirit. I don't care about culture fit. I don't care about between the ears. I don't care about that stuff in regards to Julius Randle. He's just not a good player. And he's not what Miami needs.
But he can be. He can be.
He can be, but he's not.
That's why the between the ear stuff matters.
Okay,
because he can be.
For whatever reason it is. For whatever reason it is, he's not good defensively.
That's true also.
He can't shoot from the corners. He can't shoot, especially from the corners. He needs the ball in his hands to be effective, just from a skill set perspective. I think he's a good player. I think he can be a good player in certain situations, but not on a team that already has Tyler Herro, Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, and Kyle Lowry. What Julius Randle is putting up right now, which is 14.8 shot attempts a game, that would be second behind only Tyler Herro on the Miami Heat. And that's a low for him on the Knicks. In the previous years, 17.3 field goal attempts and 18.6 field goal attempts. Those would be by far the most field goal attempts on the Heat. So imagine a Heat team with Julius Randle on it, with Jimmy Butler, Tyler Herro, Kyle Lowry, Bam Adebayo, where Julius Randle is taking the most amount of shots. And maybe you want to argue, well, if he was on this team, he wouldn't take those amount of shots. And my answer to that would be, you've never watched Julius Randle play basketball, because he absolutely will take the most shots on this team if he's on this roster. So, no, I think there's an opportunity cost alone with it. The more the ball would be in Julius Randle's hands, the less it would be in Bam's, the less it would be in Jimmy's, Tyler's, Kyle's, etc. And that is a negative outcome for Miami. It's a hard pass for me on Julius Randle. Although I wish him the best.
Agree. I do wonder, and I'm sure somebody will bring it up, and that's why I'm going to do so now. Considering the fact that he's so willing to shoot, would he be, in that sense, complimentary to Bam Adebayo because Bam shows someone willingness to take
because he misses all of his
range?
shots. So he can't. I don't care if you shoot a bunch. If you're missing all your threes,
that would allow Bam to focus on rebounding, defense, etc., which is what he's been relegated to too often throughout his career. And I wonder.
No, I want Bam shooting more. I want Bam shooting more. He's been taking a lot more shots in November. He's averaging 20 points per game in November.
But our own feelings notwithstanding, like Bam, if Bam could just focus on the little things, which he does so well, and he doesn't have to worry about scoring 30 points a game, and then you have Julius who says, hey, I'll take those shots. Don't worry about it. I'll take my 14. I'll take your 18. Don't worry about it. I'll put them up. Don't worry. And then this Bam could just focus on attacking the basket, getting putbacks and things of that sort. It's not.
Now you're just turning him into
best interest.
You're just turning Bam into prime Draymond Green, and I think like offensively, and I think he could be better than that offensively. It's not an emotional thing. It's not what I want Bam to do. I think the best version of this team. Bam is a more efficient scorer than Julius Randle, so it doesn't make any sense to give the ball to a less efficient scorer in order to free Bam up to do the things that he is already doing. You mentioned the little things. He's already doing the little things. He's already rebounding as best he can. He's never been an amazing rebounder. He's rebounding best he can. He's playing best-in-class defense. He's doing all those things already while averaging 20 points per game. So anything that gets in the way of Bam, it should be a more complimentary thing to Bam, the way that PJ Tucker was last year. More complimentary, a guy who could just...
The fact that we both dislike this idea so much means that it's almost guaranteed to happen, too. So
there's no way this happens. Julius Randle, to your point, not a Heat guy.
Kentucky guy.
Yeah, well... Should Tyler Herro come off the bench in terms of Kentucky guys? David and I debate that next. But first, today's episode of Locked On Heat is brought to you by Masterclass. With Masterclass, you can learn from the world's best minds anytime, anywhere, and at your own pace. You can learn how to do everything from the art of negotiation to songwriting. With over 180 classes from a range of world-class instructors, that thing you've always wanted to do is closer than you think. Masterclass is accessible on your phone, web, or smart TV, offering classes on the wide variety of topics, all taught by world-class instructors at the top of their fields. Each class is broken out into individual video lessons, usually around 10 minutes long. Members can explore at their own pace, and each class is supported by downloadable materials, class guides, recipes, and more. You can find all available classes at masterclass.com. Hundreds of videos lessons from 180 plus of today's most brilliant minds are available anytime, anywhere on iOS, Android, desktop, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, and Roku. Learn how to write anything from a book or a screenplay to just a letter. Learn how to communicate with your boss or your family. Learn how to make a dinner worthy of a Michelin star, or just how to make a really good scrambled egg. Explore lessons in any order you'd like across your phone, tablet, Apple TV, computer, and on the go with audio mode. Lessons of approximately 10 to 15 minutes in length fit easily into your everyday life, and an annual membership starts at just $180 a year. I highly recommend that you go check this out. This holiday, give one annual membership and get one free. Go to masterclass.com/lockedon today. That's masterclass.com/lockedon. Terms apply. Thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Danny writes in, do you believe that Tyler Herro, when he comes back, and if the Heat start losing and the ball movement / chemistry goes stagnant, that Spoelstra will have to make a decision and have him come off the bench? Don't get me wrong, I love Herro, and we need his offense, but he does wonder about maybe having to bench Tyler Herro. David, what do you think?
It's an interesting point. I think Eric Spoelstra would consider it. I don't think there's any player on this roster, with the exception of Jimmy Butler, that is above getting benched. And Bam, I mean, he's unassailable just because he's so valuable. And we've talked about that before, how important he is to this team. So Jimmy and Bam are etched, and I don't even know what's stronger than ink. You know, like they're not going anywhere as far as that starting lineup. Tyler came off the bench last year. If they were worse off with Tyler starting, and again, if they continue to lose games, and if they look just discombobulated on the offense with him out there as a starter, I'm sure he would entertain that idea. I'm going to go a step further and say that I think it's important that he does come off the bench. I know maybe I shouldn't say that, because I know that you've kind of you've kind of gone the other way on that, and we'll be having
let's debate it. I know that's how you feel, so I think we should have this conversation.
To me, the point I'm going to make is one that we brought up in yesterday's recap and the loss there. Bam Adebayo is your best player, or your most important player. You can go a step further and say Jimmy is your best player. So you've got two players there. They need to be able to operate. And the way they operate is closer to the rim, around the painted area. That's where they're most effective. Jimmy needs to get to the rim. He needs to get foul calls. That's what his strength is. Bam similarly has a low post game that he's been developing. He can shoot from the mid-range jumper a little bit more effectively now, but either way, he still does most of his damage around the paint. Kyle can toss lobs. Max Strus can toss lobs. Anybody in that starting lineup can toss lobs to Bam if that's what's necessary. Tyler needs to be the scorer that he can be and is capable of. And in order to maximize the version of this Heat team, you want to get your two most important best players going, and that's Jimmy and Bam. You don't have to worry about the 20 to 25 points per game that Tyler Herro is capable of providing. You can get those whether he starts or coming off the bench. And so why not bring him off the bench again? There's no shame in this. Tyler's ego is getting in the way of what could be the best version of this team. The idea that you have to be a starter in order to be the best player on the planet, or viewed as one of the best players, you're already one of the best players on the planet. There's only 400 of you in the NBA, and you're among the elite of those. Lean into what you do best. You've said it many times. You've told us about this. Find your role, accept your role, and be the best you can be at that role. And for you, Tyler, I think it's coming off the bench.
I don't know whether he's best coming off the bench or best as a starter. I hear your point about the fit being clunky and wanting to let Jimmy and Bam cook with the starters and then have Tyler Herro anchor that bench unit. My problem with that is that we already saw the ceiling for that strategy last year. And what it ended up being was, when at the end of games, when you really need a bucket, Tyler Herro did not know how to play with Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo and get a basket off the ball and be more of a threat in that way. He needs to learn that. He is 22 years old. He needs to figure out how to play alongside Jimmy and Bam and Kyle.
Assuming he can, though.
Well, he's got the skill. He's got the ability to do it. We've seen it in flashes. There are plays that I was pulling up recently where he's attacking off the weak side, the second side, attacking closeouts after Jimmy or Kyle penetrate and kick out. Like he's screaming off screens and catching the ball and taking shots where you want him to take them and spacing the floor. Like there's flashes of it. And so I know that he can do it. And I know that he knows he's supposed to do it because he's talked about it in the media. So I know that there's intent there. And I know that I understand that the short-term solution is to take Tyler Herro and put him on the bench. It fixes the bench unit that's not been good, and it moves Max Strus back into the starting unit, who's better defensively, and it kind of it balances some things there. Short-term, it is the better move. Long-term, it gets you nowhere really fast, because basically you just end up exactly where you were last season. And I do think that last year's Heat team, I loved last year's Heat team. They probably overachieved a little bit, right? And they were helped out by a Boston Celtics collapse at the end of Game 7 there. I just don't... The ceiling of this team is Tyler Herro in the starting unit, playing alongside Jimmy and Bam. I do think that we get too caught up in who starts and who sits and all that kind of stuff. To me, the key is he needs to learn how to play with Jimmy and Bam, as opposed to just coming off the bench for a big chunk of his minutes and just running pick and roll with whomever and just running the show. He needs to learn how to play with Jimmy and Bam, because he clearly did not know how to do it last year. I also think that the concerns about the starting lineup are vastly overblown. The starting lineup for a team that is under 500, a game under 500, their starting lineup is plus 8.5 points per 100 possessions better than their opponent. Lineups with Tyler, Bam, and Jimmy have outscored opponents by 9.8 points per 100 possessions. So those three guys work in concert well already. And in terms of the bench, I don't really care about it. I want the Heat to figure out the starting unit and how Tyler interacts with Jimmy and Bam first, and then they can figure out the bench later. Eventually, Victor Oladipo will come back, and he's going to need to be the sixth man anyway. And then what? Do you have to promote Tyler Herro back into the starting lineup? I don't know. I know that the ceiling of this team and the long-term success of this team depends on Tyler Herro, who you just signed to a $30 million a year contract extension, being a starter. And by the way, if he can't start with this group, then you ought to consider maybe moving on from him. So they got to figure it out anyway.
By long term, do you mean within the context of this season or beyond this season?
Yes, both. Like if they are going to get back to the Eastern Conference Finals, it's going to take Tyler Herro meshing with Jimmy and Bam and being a starter. And if they are going to build with a team around Tyler and Bam in the future long term, then Tyler has to start.
But by your point, though, if they take Tyler and put him at the bench, then we've already seen this version of the team because that's what last year's team was. And that's their ceiling, right? And that is an Eastern Conference finalist team, though, right? Even though they overachieved. Like if you get incremental growth from, Kyle being healthy, Bam being a better version of himself, Jimmy being playoff Jimmy, Caleb being an effective player at the four. I mean,
it's a lot of ifs. But yeah, I don't think I don't think that that's okay. I don't think that this team's ceiling is Eastern Conference Finals. It's not. Okay, you're not going to have a Boston Celtics meltdown the way that they did. Milwaukee's going to be better in the playoffs. Philadelphia's going to be better in the playoffs. Atlanta's already better. Cleveland is already better. The status quo is not good enough. It's not. And so they need to get better somehow, whether it's via trade or some sort of acquisition. That's a different thing that we've been talking about. But right now with this group, the only way to get better internally is to figure out how Tyler Herro can be a starter and thrive in that role. That's it. All right.
Well, let's see if he can do it.
Hayden writes in, what do you think the main difference is between the start of last season and the start of this one?
Obviously, the personnel. I think that's a huge thing. You bring in an infusion of energy with Kyle Lowry choosing to come here to Miami, with PJ Tucker choosing to come here, both of them with championship aspirations, both of them with championship experience. And I think that breathes just a big breath of fresh air into the organization, into that locker room, et cetera. After two really difficult years for the Miami Heat, long seasons, the longest season in NBA history.
Yeah, the bubble.
The Orlando bubble, the break, the COVID, the constant testing. There was two back-to-back seasons that were just torture for that group and very, very difficult. And so when you come back last year looking for something different, well, you got it in Lowry and PJ Tucker, and we saw that. They started off incredibly well. They won, I think, 6 of their first 7 games, 10 of their first 15, which is where the Heat are currently. They're at the 15-game mark. So there was an absolute difference there. Defensively, they were better. PJ Tucker played his role incredibly well. He fit in seamlessly within the roster, within the starting lineup right away. There haven't been any of those growing pains. This is a very different group, and I think that's what we're talking about. We're talking about Tyler Herro having growing pains. We're talking about Caleb Martin having growing pains. Are they still good? As you mentioned, yes. The statistics show that they're still a plus out there on the floor, but they're still having a hard time meshing. You're still looking at, who's going to be the driving force offensively. You got some gaps defensively as well. You've had a couple minor injury issues. There's lots of little things here. I think they've also faced tougher opponents this season that they have last year. We went through the record last year. They started off going off against the Orlando Magic. They faced the Charlotte Hornets. They faced a couple of teams that were near the bottom of the cellar, if not cellar dwellers, all perpetually. Oklahoma City, lots of rebuilding teams. Brooklyn, when they were without James Harden and without Kyrie Irving because of the whole vaccination status. So there were a lot of issues there with a lot of the opponents that they faced early on, and they were able to jump out to an early start. And I think, again, there was also this idea that, they weren't on a lot of scouting reports because you didn't know how Kyle was going to fit. You didn't know how PJ was going to fit. You didn't know what you were going to get off the bench. And it all worked beautifully for Miami. We still had Duncan Robinson in that starting lineup before his shot started to struggle. So a lot of factors going in Miami's favor last year that haven't worked in Miami's favor this year. Having said that,
I think you hit on the most important thing, David, which was that refreshing, that breath of fresh air, that PJ Tucker and Kyle Lowry brought, there was an excitement around this group going into last season that just did not exist. And you called this out in the preseason to me privately. You just didn't sense it, and you pointed it out, and I agreed with you. And I'm telling you, it is palpable. The lack of urgency, the lack of excitement for this season. I remember asking players about this before the year, and every single one of them to a T, coaches, players, whoever, you don't have to worry about that with us. We're here to compete. Okay, cool. I get it. That's the company line. All right, and every single one of them had it. And look, better to have it than not. But they're not playing like that. They're not playing like that. And you don't sense it when you're around this group. I don't think it's a bad locker room. I don't think that there's discontent. I don't think that there's a whole lot of that kind of stuff brewing. I just think that there's a different level of urgency and excitement that existed with this group last year that is not something that you can manufacture. And the Heat have had a hard time trying to tap into that. And that, to me, is the biggest difference. I agree with you. Last year's beginning of the schedule was easier. The Heat have had some rough games early on this time. They played a lot of games in the first 2 weeks, more than any other team in the NBA, and all that stuff certainly is a factor. I think that this team is better than a game under 500. I think that much is for sure. I don't think that this team is as good as it was last season. I think both of those things can be true. That said, is it time to blow it up? That's what we're going to talk about next here on Locked On Heat. But first, David, tell them about BetOnline.
BetOnline, this show, its episode is brought to you by BetOnline, which is your #1 source for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. We've got it all on betonline.net. What's the big matchup in the NFL this weekend? Because I think the Dolphins have a bye week.
The Dolphins have a bye week, so it doesn't matter.
Okay, well, that's a fair point. And if you love sports podcasts like this one, where you can find those all,
start getting those Tua MVP
well.
odds, though, right? The Tua MVP odds. That's the bet to place on BetOnline.
Is that a realistic thing?
Like, yeah.
The story kind of leads
in the
into
conversation.
It,
he's in the conversation. He's probably not going to win. It'll probably go to Patrick Mahomes. But we have a quarterback in the conversation for the first time since the 90s, so that's fun.
Hey. The Chad Pennington erasure will not stand here. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. Bet online, where the game starts.
Final question of our mailbag today. The Heat are 7-8 with a point differential of about a 500 team. Their offense and defensive rating is in the middle of the pack. Everything about this team suggests that it is just average. And we know that average is not where you want to be. With 11 of the next 16 games on the road, many of them against playoff teams, things aren't getting any easier. So my question to you, David, if this thing goes south, at what point should the Heat consider blowing it up?
I don't see any point for this organization ever saying, you know what, it's time to blow things up. A catastrophic injury, a season-ending injury to Jimmy within the next handful of games, perhaps. There's a lot of tension behind the scenes, perhaps, but I'm trying to think back to the last time that they may have tanked, which was the 2007-2008 season, right? Before they drafted Michael Beasley.
A full
they
tank,
themselves.
I mean, let's not may have. They tanked that year. They tanked.
Well, I don't think they had any choice. Like, they traded Shaq. They traded Shaq. They made some other trades there.
Yeah.
Wayne was out for most of the year with a shoulder injury. Like, there was a lot of factors.
Sure,
there.
But they tanked. Like, they effectively tanked. And I would even argue right the end of the 2013 season. It wasn't a full season tank, but the last week they kind of tanked the last couple games to make sure that they got in the lottery. Ended up picking Justice Winslow, so that was like a soft kind of end of the year tank, which I have no problem with. The
14-15 season, I guess.
Yeah.
So
it's not like a little mini 1 week tank.
You also had Chris Bosh that was like, having a career-threatening injury.
Yeah, no, look, there are plenty of reasons to tank, but either you tank or you don't tank, if we're just going to look at this as a binary, and they did tank both of those times. They had their reasons. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have. And I agree with you, by the way.
That a lot of fans expect here are like, trade Jimmy Butler while his value's at an all-time high.
Well, let's talk about that. I agree with you. It's not going to happen. The Heat are not going to do that. They're not going to blow up this team in the middle of the year. You and I agree on that. My question to you was, should they?
I made a point about that at some point earlier in the season, that if they're going to tank, this is a season to do it, because you want to get it all in on the Victor Wembanyama sweepstakes.
Oh, yeah.
Scoot Henderson, lots of, some prospects there. But my how I feel, if anybody's listened to this show for a prolonged period of time, you know that I care not a single bit for the NBA draft.
Can I ask you something?
Yes.
You've long been on that. Kudos to you. You've also sort of long been on the what is talent really? Like
Yes.
it's so undefinable. I'm just gonna ask you a point blank question. I just want you to answer it with a name. I'm gonna give you 2 names, and you give me one name as your answer. Who is more talented, Victor Wembanyama or Max Strus?
I don't know that you can answer that.
Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. Move on. Continue with your point.
No,
Continue with your point.
I remember having this conversation on Locked On NBA when we were hosting with Ben Colliver, and everybody was in Zion mania, and Zion's been a pretty decent, okay player during his NBA career.
Okay, he's been pretty good.
Is he the game changer that everybody thought he was?
He was when he was healthy.
I don't know that he's ever going to be healthy. And on top of the fact that he might be able to give you 25 to 28 points per game, he's also going to give up about 25 to 28 points per game. So that reduces his value. Wembanyama, like you watch some of the footage out there, there's the shot that everybody's, it's been making the rounds on social media. I think the comparison was to a baby giraffe. That's not healthy. Like you should not have somebody at 7 foot plus.
Okay, fine. Would you rather have, though, Victor Wembanyama or Max Strus?
Max Strus, because he's an actual NBA player today, and that's who I'd rather have on this roster. And I think that's fair. Like, again, the blowing up the idea is nonsensical to me. You claw and fight your whole way through years of mediocrity and worse, just to get a player half as good as Jimmy Butler. You've already got Jimmy Butler on the roster. Look at the Orlando Magic. When's the last time they had a goddamn star on their roster? And now we all want to lean into Paolo Banchero.
He's awesome.
That's fine. He's fine. He's fine. It's also been 15 games in his rookie campaign where he's putting up a lot of shots.
Would you also prefer to have Strus over Paolo Banchero?
What's more important to me is fit than anything. Look, they tanked a lot of years.
Banchero would be a really nice power forward.
That hasn't panned out for them. They tanked a lot of years so they could get Victor Oladipo. That didn't work out for them. They tanked for a lot of years so they could get Aaron Gordon. He's a fine defensive player, and that's about it. Tanking and blowing things up for a high draft pick. None of it guarantees anything.
It doesn't guarantee anything. Nothing guarantees anything. Like that's just a losing argument
what's
already.
Guaranteed? He's a player who's actually a player who can actually play, like Max Strus.
What's guaranteed about what the Heat have now? Nothing. Nothing is guaranteed about what they have now. Winning? They're not winning. They're a game under 500. They are playing basketball games.
Their record shows. Like I think that's just ingenuous because they're a lot better.
If your argument is that it's not guaranteed, then you're going to win every argument. Because I can come to you right now and say, you could trade for Kevin Durant right now, and that doesn't guarantee you a championship. And that's the opposite of tanking for Victor Wembanyama.
No.
So nothing is guaranteed.
Levels to that. It's
not an argument.
15 and 67, and then there's NBA championship. There's a lot in between there. And I think that's the problem, is that everybody's seeing it as, blow it up. Let's not win more than 10 games a season, or got to get the ring, or else this is all pointless.
I will say that Miami, the only stretch in which Miami has been a championship team, came in when they got Dwayne Wade in the top 5 of the draft. That's it. Without Dwayne Wade, there is no Dwayne Wade and Shaquille O'Neal championship. Without Dwayne Wade, there is no Big 3 championship. Without Dwayne Wade, this team is as it is now, forever. It is Tim Hardaway and Alonzo Mourning losing in the playoffs, and it is Jimmy Butler doing his best and being incredible, but ultimately not having enough around him, and the Miami Heat losing in the playoffs. That's what the Heat have been in its entirety of the franchise, if not for getting Dwayne Wade in the top 5 of that draft. That is where historic players come. And that's all I'm saying. And so
Jimmy Butler also
at what point should
historically better than Dwayne Wade in terms of playoff numbers, at least last year.
Let's not compare. You are in a losing fight if you're going to compare D Wade to Jimmy Butler. Who's on the?
All I'm saying is the numbers show that Jimmy last year had a better
what about the ring numbers
than any other season in Dwayne Wade's history.
What about the ring?
And what
numbers,
was he drafted
David?
at? What was he? What was
30th.
his draft?
30th. Yeah. But he didn't win a ring. He didn't win a ring. Look, you're not going to. I'm not falling for this. You're not pinning me, Jimmy versus Dwayne. You're not going to pin me.
Unless Shaq gets here, Dwayne Wade doesn't win anything either. Unless LeBron gets here. Two physical.
Fair enough. Look, a lot of things got to go right. A lot of things got to go right. I'm just giving you facts. I'm just laying out facts. In terms of if they should consider blowing it up, I'm on the fence about it. I don't know. If you really ask me, should this team ever trade Jimmy Butler? My answer would be, of course, no. If I really had to give you an answer. But I do look at what Utah just did in trading their best 2 players in Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, established all-star players, all NBA players. and the amount of draft picks that they got and the amount of young players that they got and how bright their future appears to be for now. And by the way, a team that is still competing right now. I know they lost a bunch in a row, but they are still competitive. You look at that, and it's hard not to be tempted by it. If you traded Jimmy Butler to Dallas, New York, Phoenix,
you're not getting the same return as Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell. Like that's
for Jimmy, no, but
okay,
fair. You might not get the same return, but you're getting a bunch of stuff. If you trade Jimmy Butler, I don't know what you're getting, but you're getting a bunch of stuff. You're getting players to match salary, and you're getting draft picks. And if you do that with him, if you do that with, I don't know what you could get for Lowry, maybe a first-round pick, like a team from like Washington or Minnesota, or a team that needs a fix at that position, maybe something like that. Could you trade him? Could you trade one of these guys to the Lakers and get one of these unprotected 2027, 2029 picks that everybody else wants? There are things that you could do to get younger quicker, retool around Bam and Tyler, so maybe it's not a full tank, maybe not a full blow-up, because you're still going to compete when you got Bam on the floor and Tyler. I don't know. It is tempting, but I agree with you. Like, look, if this team is 40 games in, beginning of January, and they're 10 games under 500, they should probably think about it. But at the end of the day, you, me, and Pat Riley are all going to say, no, we're not doing this. We're not trading Jimmy Butler. It's just not going to happen.
15 and 25. That's the benchmark for you?
Yeah, where you think about it. Yeah, because at that point, if you're 15 and 25, the playoffs might not even happen at that point, let alone competing. So what do you do at that point?
I mean, again, it's an interesting idea, but even then, like, how do you compete with the Houstons at the team? Like, they have to really crap the bed every night just so they can get a ping pong ball that might possibly bounce in their favor.
Right? Like, you almost have to trade Bam too, and Tyler, which it's hard to trade Tyler because of the poison pill thing. But
that's a different conversation, right? Let's go back to what we were talking about, the 2007-8 season. If Bam, who we just have both agreed might be Miami's most important, if not their best player, suffers a season-ending injury, which you hope that never happens. If that's the case, then there's no chance of them competing. Like, they just don't have it defensively. They don't have it offensively. They don't have anything. They don't have the guy who does all the little things.
Right.
Then at that point, I think you start considering the possibility of exploring a Jimmy Butler trade.
Who would take Jimmy? I mentioned Phoenix, Dallas. Those to me seem like really good teams that could use Jimmy Butler.
Will they trade Devin Booker for Jimmy Butler? Like, does he give him a better chance to win?
No. But you would get like Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, whatever picks Phoenix has.
Trade him to Milwaukee for Chris Middleton as an impending free agent?
That's interesting. I don't think Milwaukee would do that, though. I don't think that they would blow things up. Middleton and Giannis get along too much. And honestly, like, right now, Middleton is better for Milwaukee than Jimmy Butler would be, just because they have the chemistry. And trying to work in Jimmy Butler midstream is tough. Brooklyn? But, like, you're not taking Kyrie Irving back.
Yeah.
They wouldn't give up Kevin Durant for Jimmy Butler. That doesn't make any sense for Brooklyn's timeline. Portland could make a little bit of sense.
Toronto for Scotty Barnes? Would they do that?
Toronto would never do that.
For Siakam?
Siakam, OG, possibly, something like that. Draft picks, that's possible. Denver could really use a guy like Jimmy Butler. Defensive issues solved right there. New Orleans, Memphis. Memphis.
Back to Chicago for Zach LaVine, right?
Chicago for Zach LaVine, possibly. It depends. Like, I don't know. Chicago, if they're going to trade Zach LaVine, I feel like they're going to just blow it up as well. The Clippers, I don't know. Who knows? There's teams out there that, like Jimmy Butler, one of the best 10 players in the league. There are teams that would want Jimmy Butler. I don't think that that's a stretch to say. If they wanted to shop him, there would be a lot of suitors. Is kind of what Golden State could use Jimmy Butler at this point.
Dallas playing alongside Luka?
Dallas. I already mentioned Dallas. It would be ideal. Yeah, that would be a great fit.
Tim Hardaway Jr.
And whatever young, like Josh Green's off the bench, young kind of bit players, and then all the picks that they got a bunch of picks for the. Or no, they sent away a bunch of I don't even know if they have the picks to get it done. But who knows? Thank you again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Remember to subscribe to new episodes of Locked On Heat on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Ring the bell to get notified as soon as new episodes go up. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. David, it's time to blow it up.
Abolish the NBA draft.